Tell your story.
Change the conversation.
Organized by students.
TEDxYouth at SHC.
Thanksgiving is my least favorite holiday. I know, bold statement. But really, Thanksgiving needs a rebrand. All you get is dinner. Christmas, you get dinner and presents. On New Year's, you get dinner and fireworks. Thanksgiving, on the other hand, all you get is dry turkey and a more intense version of the Family Feud. But this year's Thanksgiving was different. It was the first time in almost 2 years that I've seen my whole family. My cousin Joanna can now walk. My cousin David can sing the whole Baby Shark song. I bet for many of us that the 2021 holiday season was just that. A time to feast with our loved ones that we have so dearly missed over the past 2 years. But along with the sweet reunion, Thanksgiving also brought in a storm of pandemic fatigue and political fodder. In our makeshift battlefield, you were either a dry turkey supporting liberal or a bean casserole eating conservative. Nothing in between. And yet, this binary thinking doesn't just happen at Thanksgiving dinner, it happens everywhere. From the places that we work to even when we cross a stranger on the street. We love to categorize, place the unknown into our knowns. But our love for categorization may just be the greatest hindrance to our common humanity. And that is my concern. In today's increasingly nuanced reality, we instinctively divide the world into two opposing dualities. We turn what could be a beautiful meeting of the minds into a battlefield, and our differences into barriers. So, in the next few minutes we have together, I want to first look at the origins of binary thinking. Then, we'll look at how we put our differences above our common humanity. Next, we'll look at the harms of doing so, before finally learning how to enjoy a meal, preferably not dry turkey, with the opposing side. Some theorize that a key element to human survival was binary thinking. Natural selection equipped us with a binary brain that was highly adept at analyzing risks and making sense of our complex world. This impulsive nature guided us when we only had a split second to decide whether a rustle of the leaves was friend or foe. We even lived in tribes of people who looked, talked, and acted like us, simply because it was safer to do so. In short, binary thinking created this us versus them mentality. But now, Dr. Kevin Dutton writes that in our modern world, we are ill-equipped to deal with the challenges that we now face. You see, our binary thinking makes us scared of the uncertain and any nuances that appear. If I'm presented with a global pandemic, racial unrest, or even the stability of my job, it's much easier to fall back into this mentality. Psychologist Andrew Hartz writes that we use binary thinking as a defense mechanism. Thus, we unconsciously frame ideas, individuals, or groups in all or nothing terms. And this attitude can be most directly seen in our political atmosphere. Today, we are so quick to identify each other as Democrat or Republican, but our obsessive need to label makes us overlook our common humanity. And this mentality is so toxic that we see even those closest to us as our biggest adversaries. Back in 2012, Arizona voter Holly Solomon ran her husband over because he refused to vote for Barack Obama in the presidential election. I know most of us have not gone to those lengths yet, but the sentiment still stands. We equate differences with the deeper moral flaw in our opponent's character. But I get it. It's so much easier to see everything and everyone in either this or that, right or wrong, black or white. Gray area is complicated. But by doing so, we aren't able to see the world as it truly is. Complex, nuanced, and full of all the shades in between. And while yes, binary thinking makes our lives easier to comprehend, it isn't accurate. Gray areas do exist. And when we overlook the nuance, we minimize both people and issues. In October of last year, Haiti experienced a 7.2 earthquake. leaving 1.4 million Haitians in need of refuge. So when many Haitians sought out Texas for asylum, Texas Governor Greg Abbott referred to these immigrants as animals. It's not just our politicians that oversimplify immigration. We perpetuate the same sentiment because of our fear of the uncertain. When we see our nation facing great turmoil both economically and politically, it's much easier to view immigrants as outsiders, undeserving of our help. But through this type of mentality, we reduce people into talking points. Americans versus immigrants, us versus them. And people like Henry Obregon, a 21-year-old engineering student from Nicaragua, gets stuck in our unnecessary battle. Obregon was part of a student reform movement dedicated to bringing more social justice reform to his country. Sadly, he was forced to flee after the Nicaraguan government started executing his peers. But that doesn't matter. They're just animals, right? When we use this type of mentality, not only do we strip people of their humanity, but turn our complex debates into two simplistic sides. Liberals are too soft in crime, and conservatives, plain xenophobic, with no gray area in between. And through this rigid thinking, Congress has been unable to pass any immigration reform through crossing of party lines or of that sort. You see, we believe that binary thinking will provide us quick and easy solutions. It's either this or that. But in reality, binary thinking is the death of our progress. And when we engage in this black and white world, we make assumptions, create stereotypes, roping all Muslims as terrorists, all Trump supporters as ignorant racists, and all criminals as dangerous, may be the easiest option, but it's also the most harmful. When we practice this black and white thinking, we reduce each other into labels. And soon enough, those labels become our identity. It became mine. Growing up, I never truly felt like I belonged anywhere. I was always tugged by these two worlds, either American or Indian, never both. To fit in with my peers, I rejected any part of myself that was Indian. I cringed when my grandparents spoke to me in Malayalam. I relished in the fact that my name was white passing. That was until last year, when my teacher asked me to share something about my ancestral culture with the class. I couldn't answer. I didn't know. To me, in the United States, us meant white, not Indian. How many of us today have contorted ourselves into a binary to fit in? We may look successful on the outside, but on the inside, we feel incomplete. We firmly believe that our world is a contest between two opposing sides, when in reality, it's a beautiful blend of all the shades in between. You can be both scientific and religious, loving and critical. A Kanye fan and a Swiftie. They're not mutually exclusive. Let us open up our minds to see that the things we perceive as two extremes may in fact overlap. In fact, modern medicine and scientific discovery is rooted in the Catholic Church, dating back to medieval times. And sometimes, to be truly loving, you need to be honest and critical. And today, in this theater full of amazing speakers, leaders, teachers, and students, let us remember that we are not one-dimensional people, but rather a mosaic of all of the experiences that we share. And when we finally acknowledge the nuances each of us holds, we can connect on a deeper level. So together, let's reject the binaries that have historically divided us. First, we'll start by identifying our similarities. Research professor at the University of Houston, Brene Brown, writes that when we seek out moments of collective joy and show up for experiences of collective hate, the more difficult it becomes to deny our human connection, even with people we may disagree with. On September 11, 2001, Congress met on the steps of Capitol Hill and sang, "God bless America." Republican, Independent, Democrat. It didn't matter. That night, we were one nation. And still today, even though we may not all share the same tenets of religion or origins of our last name, when we see ourselves as a united nation, we can come together and solve our complex but often common problems. Secondly, let's learn to celebrate our differences. It's normal to have conflicting feelings with someone you may have opposing viewpoints with, but let's minimize that by heeding to what retired professor at CSU Fullerton, Jeff Cotter, suggests. Enter into other people's worlds by learning their customs and cultures. In other words, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And today, when we do so, we can break down the prejudices we may carry, create a more inclusive world, and see each other as we truly are. And finally, if you see a situation being put in an either-or scenario, consider, is there a gray area we're overlooking? If so, psychologist Clay Drinko writes to overlook the assumptions we may make and dig deeper into the nuances to bring further clarity into our perspectives. And when we finally see the world in all its shades, innovation will be abundant because we will take into account the diversity of thought and solutions. Experiences will be shared because we will no longer be afraid to confining to these restricting binaries. And our relationships will truly thrive because for once, we'll see each other as we truly are. As Madeleine Albright once said, no matter how we define us or them, we, the people, is an inclusive race. So next year, when we all gather around for Thanksgiving dinner, remember, the holiday gives us something to fight for. Pumpkin spice lattes. So, let us acknowledge our nuances and celebrate our differences. And then maybe Thanksgiving won't just be a dinner, but a dinner with a sense of togetherness for which to truly be grateful. Thank you.